The galaxy was a vast and interconnected web of civilizations, each one vying for power, survival, or simply meaning. Humanity had once been a quiet, isolated species, lost among countless others, no different than the thousands of young worlds seeking their place in the cosmos. But then humanity did what it always did, surpassed the expectations of the galaxy and claimed its rightful place among the stars. Earth had expanded into the galaxy with surprising rapidity, its ships and research stations now dotting the space between distant stars. Humans, with their irrepressible drive and ingenuity, had made their mark, from first contact with the ancient Caltherii, whose civilization was millennia old, to their alliance with the towering Yalthan species, known for their peacekeeping efforts in the outer sectors. The human influence was undeniable, and for many, it was a welcome change. But there were others who saw humanity's rise with suspicion and even hostility. The galaxy was not a place where kindness ruled, power did. And now, standing at the precipice of this vast cosmic stage, humanity had begun to understand that power could be gained in many forms, through might, through politics, and, most terrifyingly, through the rare and delicate art of medical mastery. At the heart of the known galaxy, a regal and powerful species dominated the star systems, the Krathi. With their long, slender bodies, smooth scales that shimmered with an iridescent sheen, and elongated heads crowned with multiple sets of eyes, they commanded the respect and fear of many. The Krathi had created an empire that stretched across dozens of star systems, with a sophisticated political structure led by their most exalted and revered being, the Kroth Queen. The Kroth Queen, Voraka, was the highest authority in Krathi society, holding dominion not only over her people but over the very fabric of their civilization. The Krathi were a hive species, their entire hierarchy built around a unique collective consciousness that was anchored by the Queen's singular mind. Her thoughts reverberated throughout the collective, dictating everything from the movements of their fleets to the policies of their scientists. When the Queen spoke, the entire Krathi court listened without question. The Krathi had a history of dealing with countless species, but none had ever dared to question their sovereignty. Until humans. Humanity had been invited to the Krathi homeworld under a pretense of diplomacy. The Krathi, intrigued by Earth's rapid rise, had extended an olive branch in the form of a medical exchange program, an opportunity for humans to provide the Krathi with medical expertise that could enhance their already impressive biological and technological advancements. Humanity's medical prowess, however, was something the Krathi had underestimated. For all their intelligence and collective consciousness, the Krathi were facing a crisis. An ancient virus, one that had ravaged their kind for centuries, was evolving and becoming more lethal. Despite their advanced technology, they could not rid themselves of this persistent biological threat. It was here that Earth's finest minds, led by a singular human doctor, were brought in, hoping to offer the solution the Krathi had long sought. But there was a complication. The Krathi Queen, Voraka, was dying. Her body had been slowly withering away under the pressure of the virus, and with her weakening, the Krathi Empire itself was beginning to fracture. The court, once unified in its devotion to the Queen, had begun to splinter, with rival factions vying for control of the empire. The question was no longer just about curing the Queen's disease, it was about saving the Krathi civilization itself. This was where the human doctor, Dr. Elena Voss, entered the picture. Dr. Elena Voss was a name that carried weight. She had been humanity's most brilliant physician, specializing in extraterrestrial biology, virology, and genetic manipulation. She had helped devise cures for diseases that had threatened human colonies on distant planets, and her expertise had saved countless lives. But it was her work on a particularly obscure and rare alien pathogen that had brought her to the Krathi. The Krathi court had summoned Elena to their palace, a colossal structure that stretched high into the planet's atmosphere, constructed from gleaming black stone and adorned with carvings depicting the Krathi's long, proud history. The palace was the heart of Krathi culture, where power and secrets coalesced. It was here that Elena would come face to face with Queen Voraka. As Elena entered the Queen's private chamber for the first time, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. The chamber was an enormous, circular space, illuminated by bioluminescent plants that pulsed softly in the air. At the center, suspended in a large, crystalline cocoon, was the queen herself, her form frail, almost ethereal, surrounded by swirling tendrils of light that were her hive's collective thoughts, displayed in holographic form. The Crothy attendants, who normally maintained a stoic and respectful silence, now murmured in hushed tones, uncertain of the future. Dr. Voss approached the queen with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The Crothy queen's body was a marvel of biological architecture. Her skin, which once shimmered with vibrant colors, now appeared dull and cracked. Her many eyes flickered as she observed Elena, the weight of her collective consciousness pressing into the human's mind. And then, the most crucial moment of all, the touch. Dr. Voss reached out, her fingers trembling as they hovered over the queen's fragile form. Her heart pounded in her chest. This was not just a patient. This was the queen of an entire species, the mother of a collective, the anchor of a civilization. The stakes were beyond comprehension. The moment her fingertips made contact with the Crothy queen's skin, the entire room went silent. Every Crothy in the chamber froze, their collective consciousness hanging on a single point. Their queen was being touched by a human. The air seemed to crackle with electricity as the court gasped. Elena felt a ripple of energy pulse through her fingertips, a surge of biological data rushing into her mind in a split second. It was like she had unlocked a gateway into the deepest secrets of Crothy biology. In that moment, she felt the weight of the entire species within her, 1,000 voices, all speaking as one, yet all sharing the same fear. It was an intimate moment of understanding, as Elena's mind connected with the queen's, as if she had breached the boundary of a species' most sacred threshold. The court watched with bated breath. It was not just a physician tending to the sick, it was a human, uniting with the heart of Crothy civilization, offering what was, in their eyes, both a lifeline and a threat. Elena knew what they were thinking. She had touched the queen. She had dared to interfere in a process that no other species had ever been allowed to. In doing so, she had crossed the line. Voraka's eyes flickered open, her gaze meeting Elena's directly for the first time. The queen's voice, both a whisper and a roar in Elena's mind, reverberated through the human's consciousness. "You are human," Voraka thought, her voice distant yet powerful. "Why are you here? Why do you touch me, when all others fear to?" Elena could not help but respond mentally, her voice almost trembling in the profound silence that had enveloped the room. "I'm here to help you, Your Majesty. I have no fear, only the will to heal." And in that moment, something shifted. The gasp that shook the court. As the words settled in the air, the collective mind of the Crothy court seemed to ripple in disbelief. They had not expected such a response. No one had ever dared to touch the queen, let alone speak to her with such defiance, such respect. The gasp that spread throughout the court was not just one of surprise, it was one of awe, fear, and something else entirely, recognition. The Crothy queen, revered as the lifeblood of her people, was no longer simply a figure of power. She was a patient. And in that moment, Elena Voss realized something that would change the entire course of the Crothy Empire. The queen had become humanized. The court's reaction was instantaneous. Every Crothy in the chamber, from the youngest attendants to the high-ranking officials, felt the ripple of Elena's touch, felt it as a challenge, a breach of protocol, and perhaps, a glimpse of hope. But the real question remained, could a human, a single doctor, really heal the Crothy queen, and in doing so, prevent the unraveling of an entire empire? The ripple of hope and fear. The silence that enveloped the chamber after Elena's touch was so profound that it seemed to freeze time itself. For a long moment, no one moved. The Crothy court, a collective of thousands of minds bound by a single consciousness, was stunned. The weight of what had just happened settled slowly across the room like a heavy fog. Elena could feel the tremor of uncertainty ripple through the queen's mind, a wave of emotions flooding her mental senses. It was not fear, as Elena had feared, but something far more complex, something akin to curiosity. The Crothy queen was the center of the hive mind, the focal point of all Crothy thought. And yet, Elena had touched her, had bridged the chasm between species, and, in doing so, challenged everything the Crothy believed about their sovereignty and their biology. Voraka's voice broke through the silence, resonating in Elena's mind with a power that felt like an earthquake. "Why do you not fear us, human?" the queen asked, her thoughts strangely gentle but still brimming with ancient authority. "Why do you touch me when all others have kept their distance?" Elena could sense the awe and confusion in the queen's words, and the weight of the moment hit her all over again. The queen was not simply curious, she was struggling to understand. The Krathi had always been the ones in control, the ones who ruled without question. And here, for the first time in their long history, their queen had been touched by a human. Elena took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, knowing that her response could either endear her to the Krathi or provoke their wrath. She spoke carefully, but with the same resolve that had always guided her in her work. "I have no fear because I see you, Queen Voraka," Elena's voice echoed in the chamber, though she knew it was only in the queen's mind that her words truly reached. "I understand your suffering, and I know what's at stake. This virus, this disease does not just threaten you, it threatens everything you've built. But I am here to help. To offer what we can, no matter the cost." The queen was silent for a moment, and the court waited, hanging on her every word, even though they knew it was not just her voice that they would hear, but the collective thoughts of the hive. The air was thick with anticipation, and Elena could feel the weight of the Krathi's gaze upon her, every mind in the room evaluating, calculating, and reacting. Then, at last, the queen's thoughts broke through, more profound than before. "You are bold, human. You claim to offer us salvation. Yet, you know not the depths of what you ask. We have ruled for eons. We have controlled the fates of galaxies. And yet, now we are brought low by a disease that we cannot see nor understand. You are not the first to offer us help." Voraka paused, and Elena felt a flicker of something, an almost imperceptible shift in the queen's thoughts. It was as if the queen was weighing something far beyond the immediate crisis. "But you are the first to offer without expectation. To touch us without fear." The queen's words were heavy, laden with meaning. Elena's heart raced as she realized the enormity of the moment. The queen, who had been untouchable, who had reigned over her people with the unwavering force of a god, was now looking to her for guidance. And then, before Elena could fully process the significance, Vorakov spoke again, this time with a clarity that resonated throughout the chamber. "We will allow you to proceed. But know this, human, if you fail, it will not just be your life at stake. It will be the fate of your entire species. And I will not forgive your failure." The collective gasps that rang through the court were not only of shock, they were of recognition. Voraka had granted Elena a rare privilege, one that no outsider had ever been given before, access to the queen's body, the very core of Krathi civilization. The moment Elena had feared, the point of no return had come. She was no longer just a healer. She was now the fulcrum upon which the future of an empire, and perhaps the future of galactic relations, would balance. As the Krathi court's shock began to fade, the atmosphere in the chamber shifted. There was still fear, an underlying current of it, but now there was something else as well. A begrudging respect. The Krathi had always prided themselves on their resilience, their ability to endure hardship through their collective consciousness, and yet here was this human, a member of a species they had once considered beneath them, daring to do what no one else could. Voraka, her fragile form still held by the crystalline cocoon, seemed to pause in thought. Her thoughts swirled around Elena like a storm, circling and lashing out, probing her resolve, her intent. The queen, despite her weakening state, was not a simple creature. She was ancient, her mind vast and filled with the collective knowledge of an empire that had flourished for millennia. Elena could feel the pressure mounting. This was no longer about curing a disease. This was about proving to the Krathi, to Voraka, that humanity had something to offer beyond what the Krathi had assumed. "Your Majesty," Elena said, her voice steady despite the intensity of the situation. "I will not fail you. But we need to work together. This virus, it's not just a pathogen. It's a weapon, one that's been evolving with you, adapting, almost as if it's been studying your biology, your weaknesses." For the first time, Voraka's thoughts wavered. There was a flicker of something in her mind, an unsettling realization. The virus, the disease that had plagued the Crothy for so long, was not just a natural occurrence. It had been designed. Elena's next words, though quiet, echoed with a certainty that sent a ripple through the entire court. If we're going to save you, Your Majesty, we need to start by understanding the true nature of this virus. And that means we need to work together in ways no one has ever dared before. The entire court seemed to collectively exhale, a deep, resonating sigh that vibrated through the chamber. There were whispers, murmurs of disbelief, and then slowly acceptance. The Crothy, who had once been so confident in their superiority, now found themselves at the mercy of an unexpected ally, a human doctor who had dared to do the impossible. Elena felt a shift. The room, once filled with apprehension, was now charged with the electricity of something new. Something unknown. But she wasn't alone in this. The Crothy had granted her a rare and precious gift, their trust. And with that trust, Elena understood the stakes of her mission more than ever before. Over the next few days, Elena worked tirelessly within the Queen's private medical chambers. She had been given access to the most guarded of Crothy knowledge, and alongside her human team, she began to unravel the mysteries of the virus. But the deeper they dug, the more they realized the true complexity of what they were dealing with. This was no ordinary disease, it was a bio-engineered weapon, designed to target the Crothy Queen specifically. The pathogen had been developed over centuries, adapting to the Crothy's biology in ways that made it nearly impossible to cure using traditional methods. As the days turned into weeks, Elena's bond with the Queen deepened. They communicated not just through words, but through thoughts, Elena's mind now an open channel into the Queen's vast, collective consciousness. Elena began to understand the Crothy on a level few humans ever could. She saw their history, their victories, and their struggles. She saw the weight that Voraka carried as the sole anchor of a dying civilization. But Elena also saw the cracks that were beginning to form in the Crothy court. As the virus continued to ravage the Queen's body, the factions within the court grew more desperate. Some Crothy began to question whether Elena's treatment was truly the right path. Others, more radical, suggested that perhaps it was time for a new queen, one who could rise from the ashes of the old order. Tensions escalated. Elena could feel the strain, the simmering anger of those who saw their power slipping away. The political landscape was as fragile as the Queen's health, and each decision she made could mean the difference between life and death, not just for Voraka, but for the entire Crothy Empire. And yet, Elena remained undeterred. She had no time for politics. She had no time for the games of power. All that mattered was saving the Queen. If she could do that, perhaps she could save the Crothy, and maybe, just maybe, she could prove that humanity had something far more valuable to offer than just technology or military strength. Her touch had changed everything. Now, it was time to finish what she had started. Weeks had passed since Elena first touched the Crothy Queen, and with every passing day, the gravity of the situation became more pressing. The delicate balance between the Queen's health, the fractured court, and the fragile alliance between humanity and the Crothy was teetering dangerously on the edge. Elena had made tremendous progress in understanding the virus, its molecular structure, its ability to adapt, and most critically, its singular focus on the Crothy Queen. What had initially been thought to be a biological mutation and anomaly was now revealed to be a precision weapon designed specifically to incapacitate her. The virus was not merely a natural disease, it was something much darker, a creation of ancient rivals, a sentient pathogen capable of evolving in response to any treatment. As Elena worked tirelessly in the lab alongside her team of human scientists, the court became increasingly divided. There were factions within the Crothy, old rivals to the Queen's line, who believed that the only way to preserve the empire was to let Voraka die and have a new queen ascend. Others, loyal to the dying monarch, argued that Elena's treatment, however untested, was their only hope. The whispers among the court grew louder, more insistent. And in the shadows, old enemies saw opportunity. One such faction was led by Crethvier, a powerful Crothy general who had long chafed under the Queen's rule. Krethvier's faction believed that the only way to revive the Krothi Empire was to break free from the old ways, to cast aside the collective hive mind and establish a new order where individual power ruled. If the queen died, they would move quickly to place one of their own, someone who could restore the Krothi to their former glory. Krethvier's faction had quietly begun to rally support, subtly undermining Elena's work, casting doubt on her abilities, and even suggesting that the humans' involvement was prolonging the inevitable. They whispered that no outsider, especially not a human, should have control over the fate of the queen. What they failed to realize, however, was that Voraka, despite her frailty, still held a sharp mind, and she was keenly aware of every whispered plot. Inside the queen's private medical chamber, Elena found herself caught in the crossfire. As the queen's condition continued to worsen, the pressure on Elena mounted. She knew that time was running out, not only for the queen but for the survival of the Krothi Empire itself. Voraka's weakening body was becoming a metaphor for the empire's crumbling unity. Elena sat beside the queen, who had been suspended in a semi-conscious state for the past few days. The med-drones hummed softly as they monitored the queen's vitals, their delicate appendages conducting intricate scans of her fragile body. The glow of bioluminescent plants outside the chamber flickered in the darkness, casting long shadows across the room. Elena's fingers brushed against the queen's cool, iridescent skin once more, her touch a silent plea for strength. "You are not alone," Elena thought, sending her presence into the queen's mind. "I will not let you fall." Voraka's thoughts rippled through Elena's mind, filled with a deep sadness that transcended words. The collective consciousness of the Krothi was slowly fading, and it wasn't just the virus that had drained the queen's strength, it was the immense weight of her responsibilities. Elena could feel the centuries of leadership, the endless decisions, the countless lives that had depended on the queen's will. Now, it was all unraveling, and Voraka knew that the future of her people hung in the balance. "I am no longer the queen I once was," Voraka admitted, her voice heavy with resignation. "Perhaps my time is truly over." "No," Elena replied softly, her voice determined. "You are still the queen, Voraka. You still have a chance to save your people. But I need you to trust me. I need you to trust humanity." The queen's thoughts flickered with something akin to a laugh, but it was bitter. "Trust," she mused. "Trust has never been my greatest strength. We Krothi have always ruled with certainty, with power. Now, we are faced with the unknown." Elena's eyes softened, and she placed both hands gently on the queen's scales. "Sometimes the unknown is where we find our greatest strength. But you're not alone in this fight. I'll fight for you, for your people. We can do this together." Voraka's thoughts were quiet for a moment, and then, as if a great weight had shifted, she responded. Perhaps you are right, human. Perhaps it is time to trust in something new." Outside the medical chamber, the Krothi court was in full disarray. The whispers had turned to shouts, and the once united body of the hive mind was now splintering into factions. Those who supported Elena's treatment were clashing with those who sought to replace the queen. The debates became more heated, more violent. Krethvier's faction was gaining strength, and they made no secret of their disdain for the human doctor's involvement. At the heart of this political storm, however, stood Jalkar, Voraka's most trusted advisor and the head of her inner circle. Jalkar was a staunch loyalist, one who had always believed in the unity of the hive mind and the sacred role of the queen. But even Jalkar could see that the Krothi's future was in jeopardy. And while he would never betray the queen, he also knew that there was no time left to waste. "Elena Voss," Jalkar said, standing before the court with a voice that carried both authority and desperation. "You have our trust, but you must understand this: if you fail, it will not only be the death of our queen. It will be the death of our way of life. Our civilization is built on the strength of the hive mind. If Voraka falls, the court will fracture beyond repair." Elena nodded solemnly. "I understand the stakes, Jalkar. But you need to understand something else. This virus is unlike anything your people have faced before. It's not just a disease, it's a weapon, and it's evolving faster than we can keep up with. If we don't act now, all of you will be left with nothing. Krethvier, standing in the shadows of the room, sneered. Empty promises, human. I see through your words. You are no healer. You are simply here to prolong the inevitable. The queen will die, and with her, your precious hive mind will crumble. And when that happens, we will rise. The room erupted in a chorus of voices, a cacophony of dissent and anger. But Jalkar's voice rose above the din, cutting through the noise with a clarity that silenced the court. Enough! Jalkar commanded. You forget your place, Krethvier. This is not your time. For the first time, Elena saw the cracks in the Krothi leadership more clearly. The division had been there all along, hidden behind the facade of unity, but now it was out in the open. And if the queen could not be saved, the Krothi would be torn apart from within. The next day, Elena stood before the queen once more, her medical team busy at work preparing the next round of treatments. Voraka's condition had worsened overnight, and the time for hesitation was over. The queen's body was now on the brink of collapse, her vitals weak and unstable. But even in her frailty, there was a sense of peace about the queen. She had accepted her fate, and in that acceptance, there was something deeply profound. Voraka's mind, once dominated by the weight of centuries of leadership, was now a place of quiet reflection. I have seen the future, human, the queen's thoughts echoed. It is not for me to decide. It is for my people, and for you. Elena nodded, understanding what the queen meant. Her decision was made. She would fight, but it was no longer just about saving the queen. It was about saving the Krothi, about proving to them that there was more to strength than power and tradition. As the final preparations were made, Elena spoke one last time to the court. I will not fail you, she said, her voice unwavering. But understand this: if I succeed, it will be a new era for the Krothi. It will be a time of change, of trust, and of unity. The court was silent. And for the first time in history, they truly listened. The tension in the air was thick, so palpable that it felt as though the very walls of the queen's medical chamber were holding their breath. Elena stood before Voraka, her hand steady as she adjusted the bio-interceptor, the device that would carry the final strain of the cure she had developed. It was a complex concoction of human medicine, Krothi biology, and alien tech that had taken weeks of painstaking work, and there was no more time for errors. The queen, suspended in a cocoon of translucent crystal, appeared more fragile than ever, her normally vibrant skin now dull and ashen. Her breathing was shallow, her mind flickering between moments of lucidity and unconsciousness. But there was something in the queen's mind, something that Elena had come to recognize. It wasn't just the consciousness of an individual, it was the pulse of the entire Krothi race. A heartbeat that still thrummed in the depths of her being. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, drawing in a breath. This is it. This is the only chance. As she activated the device, a soft hum filled the room, followed by a faint blue glow that emanated from the queen's body. It was the first sign of real hope since Elena had arrived. The treatment was working, but it wasn't enough. Not yet. Outside the chamber, the Krothi court had assembled, a sea of alien minds whispering in a mix of fear, hope, and anger. The factions were now fully at odds, their differences irreconcilable. Even those who had once supported Voraka's reign were beginning to question whether she could truly save them. The political landscape was shifting rapidly, and soon the moment would come when the Krothi would have to decide whether to remain united under the queen's guidance or tear themselves apart in the face of inevitable change. Elena felt the weight of those decisions as she worked. But she knew that this was not just a battle for survival, it was a test of faith. Not just faith in her ability to heal, but faith in the possibility of change. Could the Krothi learn to trust each other and the humans who had once been beneath them in the aftermath of this crisis? In the grand hall outside the queen's chamber, the Krothi court stood divided. Krethvier, now emboldened by the queen's ongoing weakness, was no longer hiding his true ambitions. He had begun to rally his supporters openly, casting doubt on Elena's treatment and declaring that the time had come to end the old order. We cannot wait forever, Courtroom declared, his voice a booming ripple through the hive mind. The Queen is failing. The disease is not just a disease, it's a sign. A sign that our time has passed. It's time for a new leader, one who can bring true strength to the Courtroom. There was a murmuring of agreement among his supporters. Among the Courtroom, where unity had once been paramount, now there was dissent, a fracture deep enough to threaten the very foundation of their society. But Jalkar, loyal to the Queen to his core, stepped forward, his presence commanding. "You forget yourself, Courtroom," he said, his voice steady and forceful. "It is not you who will decide the future of the Courtroom. The Queen still lives, and as long as she breathes, it is she who holds the fate of our people." The debate raged on, the court's collective consciousness growing louder, more frantic. But in the midst of the turmoil, there was something different in the air. It was not just the arguments or the division, it was the sense of something new, something stirring. Elena's words, her promises, had reached them. They could feel the change, whether they liked it or not. In the Queen's medical chamber, Elena felt the shift as well. The glow from the device intensified, and the Queen's vitals spiked briefly. But then, just as quickly, they plummeted. Elena's heart raced. "No!" she exclaimed, pressing her hands to the Queen's scales. "Stay with me, Voraka." But the Queen's thoughts were no longer as clear. They flickered, erratic and frenzied. "I do not have much time, human. I have failed them. I have failed the hive." Elena's mind was a whirlwind of emotions. She had come so far, faced so much danger, only to be on the precipice of losing everything. The virus was mutating faster than she could handle, her treatment on the verge of collapse. Yet, she knew that there had to be another way. There was always another way. "You haven't failed anyone," Elena thought desperately, pushing all her mental energy into the Queen's mind. "You're not alone. Your people, they need you now more than ever. Don't give up." But it wasn't just the Queen who needed to hear this. Elena knew that the Courtroom needed to hear it, too. The fate of the entire empire rested on the fragile threads of hope and trust that she had woven with her actions. The tension was unbearable. Elena's fingers hovered above the controls of the bio-interceptor, ready to administer the final dose. But the virus was evolving faster than any human technology could keep up with. She needed to act now, or risk losing everything. And then, something miraculous happened. Elena felt a shift. A presence. Not just Voraka's, but the collective consciousness of the Courtroom, all of them, swirling together in the deepest recesses of the Queen's mind. It was as if the entire hive was reaching out, lending its strength to her. All the years of leadership, of wisdom, of knowledge accumulated over eons, it was now focused on one single point, Elena. Voraka's thoughts emerged, clearer than they had been in days. "I see it now," the Queen's voice resonated in Elena's mind. "The path forward, it is not just through medicine, through science. It is through unity, through belief in something greater than ourselves. For too long, I have ruled alone. But now, I understand. We are stronger together. All of us." In that instant, Elena knew what she had to do. She connected herself directly to the Courtroom hive mind, opening her mind fully to their collective thoughts. The interface was overwhelming, a rush of emotions, memories, and knowledge that threatened to swallow her whole. But Elena held firm, centering herself on the core truth that had guided her from the beginning: trust and the will to survive. The Queen's final command came, not as a voice, but as a surge of unity: "You are one of us now. Together, we fight. Together, we heal." Elena's hands moved swiftly, injecting the final formula into the Queen's bloodstream. The device hummed, pulsed with energy, and then the Queen's body stiffened, her eyes glowing with a fierce light. Elena could feel the change, the way the virus began to retreat, as though the very foundation of the Courtroom hive mind had rejected it. The collective consciousness, once faltering, now surged with renewed strength. It was not just the Queen who had healed, it was the entire race. In that moment, the Courtroom were united once more, their future no longer in the hands of a dying monarch or a divided court. But the true power of the moment was more profound than that. In a rare moment of clarity, Elena realized something that transcended the virus, the politics, and the war for power. The Krathi had evolved. They had come to understand that their true strength lay not in their collective mind alone, but in the connections they made beyond themselves. And, in a twist of fate, it was humanity, something they had long considered inferior, that had shown them the way. The days following the cure's success were a blur. Elena and her team watched in awe as Voraka's health stabilized. The Queen, though weak, had returned to her full mind, her collective consciousness now more vibrant than ever. The hive mind had been healed, its fragmentation mended, and the Krathi were once again a united empire. But the political landscape had shifted irrevocably. Krethvier and his faction, once so sure of their plans, were now forced into a corner. The Krathi had been given a second chance, and with it came the realization that change was inevitable. The old ways of dominance and division were crumbling, replaced by something new, something more fragile, but also more powerful. In the end, Voraka made a choice. She would remain the queen, but her reign would no longer be defined by isolation or fear. She would lead her people into an era of cooperation, of shared strength. And Elena, for her part, would remain by her side not as a healer, but as a bridge between their worlds. And thus, a new era began. One where the Krathi and humanity would stand together, stronger than ever before, not just as allies, but as partners in an uncertain, but hopeful future.